Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Life Science Rundown. That is the podcast where we discuss current regulatory complexities facing the life science industry and explore innovative ways to overcome those challenges. I am your host, Nicholas Capman, President and CEO of the FDA Group. Before we get started, here's a quick word about who we are. The FDA Group is a consulting firm that helps life science companies in the areas of regulatory submissions, audit projects, mock inspections, staff augmentation, and remediation. So if you ever find yourself in need, just head over to the FDAgroup.com to check us out and get in touch. So today I am speaking with Mike Martin. Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Hey, good, Nick. It's good to see you again.
Absolutely. Appreciate you joining me on this podcast. So before we jump into the topic, would you kindly introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Mike Martin. I'm the president and CEO for ISPE. I've been in the life science industry for nearly 40 years, 30 plus years of that spent at Lilly, various roles around the world, and then almost 7 years in a consulting company called CAI, also doing projects around the world. And this last year, I've been serving as ISPE's CEO for its global organization.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So today we're going to be talking about how can we prepare today's workforce to shape the future of pharma. I would say, from your vantage point as ISP's president and CEO, what are the biggest forces reshaping the pharmaceutical industry today, and how are they changing the expectations for our workforce?
Yeah, so Nick, I think that the pharma industry is in a industrial revolution of sorts. So we call it Pharma 4.0 at ISPE. That's a term that we use. But if you look at the other industries in the world, like the automotive industry, it's gone through a number of different cycles of automation. And in typical terminology, when we describe industry 4.0 or industrial revolution 4.0, it's usually about some type of very integrated automation with smart devices and a lot of very deep control systems. And I think that's where pharma is steering lately in the last 5 years or so. There's a lot of advanced robotics being applied to jobs and tasks that used to be done by operators. And even more recently, a lot of AI driving some of the repetitive tasks to be done by computer or by machine. And I think that's a big change for the industry. I think that's going to accelerate. I think, Nick, those types of job changes drive a different skill set requirement for the people that work in our industry. And I think, like across history, some roles get eliminated as that happens and new roles get created. And then that means that the industry has to reskill.
Hmm.
But I'd like to use this term. I don't think I've invented it, but I'm going to say it here. I haven't researched to see if it's online anywhere, but the idea of pre-skilling is out there where people are actually trying to create the skilled workforce they need before they even hire it. So they're influencing educational
Hmm.
institutions to develop programs that would produce talent that they could use in their factories.
Hmm.
I don't think industry is going to be able to passively sit back and wait for this automation wave to happen and then react to it. I think they're going to have to go influence that, influence the skills that they need, reskill people, and even pre-skill people to match that.
Hmm. I promise I'm not going to go off on a tangent, but I will
Okay.
say, as it pertains to that, I've always kind of before AI, I always, read books, gone to conferences, seminars in order to kind of keep my education level up. The interesting thing about this day and time, in the age of AI and data, is I feel like I can't learn enough quick enough.
Mm.
I think maybe that concept of pre-skilling kind of falls in parallel with that comment.
I think you're correct. I think that's something that all of us are experiencing, the rapid change. Now, I think the newer workforce, I think, adapts to that more quickly than guys that are my age. So I think they have that advantage. But we can talk about that further as we go on through the podcast.
Okay. Well, in your experience leading global engineering and manufacturing projects, what skills or mindsets have become more critical in the last decade than they were before?
Yeah, I think that some skills, some mindsets, they're always going to be necessary. Ideas like integrity. I don't think it matters what year you live in. where you live in the world, that idea of integrity, if you don't have that as a part of your mindset, I think that that's not going to make you marketable in this type of environment, in any environment. I think the idea of collaboration, not assuming that you're going to do everything by yourself. You're always going to need help. And the more complicated things get, the more different types of people you'll need to help. And then this idea of being curious, I think is a, a demanded all-time skill set or mindset that people need to have. Why does this happen? Why does this work? Why does this break? I think curiosity is a very important part. I would also say, Nick, that I believe character trumps knowledge. Now, you might say that's kind of a bold statement, but I think if you have the right type of character, you can learn things. You and I have done that through our careers. Things that we didn't know 20 years ago that we know a lot about today didn't happen just because of our character. It happened because we applied our time to it. And so I think if you have the right kind of character, including something like curiosity, it will solve all sorts of knowledge gaps that might come about. I think, though, that there are some skills, some mindsets that might be more necessary going forward. I'll suggest these to you. I think change inclination. So what I mean is the opposite of change aversion. Some people resist change. I don't want this change. I like it the way it is. I think going forward, people are going to have to be change inclined, meaning let's change it. I like the way it is, but I think if we just sit here, it's going to be too static. I think that's a skill we all need to develop. And then I think we shouldn't overlook the need for deep technical expertise. If we don't have that, we don't know when the AI is wrong. And I've used AI here, even in the later stages of my career, and there's been times it's given me answers, and I think that is not correct. And if you don't have enough deep learning, you won't know that.
Absolutely. So everything that you said did connect. Just a couple points in terms of AI. I remember when we first started experimenting with it. We wanted to see what it would produce in terms of a guide for 510(k)s. Not good. So it just really falls in line with you that this I think AI is kind of like somebody arguably at an entry level position where you can ask them like you would ask agentic AI to go and can do something, but you have to review the work and you have to make sure that it aligns with what you're expecting out of it. The one thing I wanted to go back is just in the beginning of the answer, you mentioned, so the original question is, what skills or mindsets have become more critical in the last decade than they were before? I was able to connect with all of them, other than the first one. You mentioned integrity. Could you comment a little bit more on why that's more important now than it was before, or were you intending to mean something else?
No, I don't mean that it's more important. What I was trying to say is that some skills are always going to be necessary. And I mentioned three skills there. I don't think integrity is going to be more important in the future. I think has always been important. And if you're a person that operates without integrity, you won't survive in any work environment. I think that's a constant skill, but I think that it needs to be emphasized. I
Yeah.
think sometimes our industry gets a reputation it doesn't deserve, and there's integrity implications that people point at related to it.
Sure, especially at the highest levels.
Especially, yeah.
Yeah. If you could design the ideal pharma professional of the future, what blend of technical, digital, and leadership capabilities would that person need?
Yeah, I liked this question. I've thought about this a little bit across my career, not just in prep for the podcast question if it came up, I'm going to tell you this background story. I had the privilege at one time of leading some super talented technical experts. This was at Lilly in one of my roles at Lilly as I was an engineering director for a manufacturing plant. And I described these folks as the engineering SEAL team. So in the US, that's a Special Forces Navy operation if people aren't familiar with that. But these guys and gals were just extremely knowledgeable on their areas of discipline. I think that the ideal professional will have to have a deep knowledge of specific areas. I don't think it will be right or ever has been right to expect any one person to be deep in everything. It's not really possible for humans to do that, given the amount of time that we live on this planet. So I think you'll need multiple experts that are deep in parallel, adjacent, or even slightly overlapping subjects, but they need to be deep. And so if I was designing a genetically modified industry professional, that would be the first thing I would plug in is you need to be deep in X or Y or Z.
Mm.
The second thing I would want to make sure was built in were some of these character traits. We mentioned some of those in the last question and answer, but this idea of trust. Trust is crucial. You might say, well, what's that have to do with a pharmaceutical professional or a technical professional? It has everything to do with it. Whether I'm giving you a leadership answer or whether I'm giving you a technical answer, you need to trust that I know what I'm talking about. Else, you won't be sure if the answer is what you're steering for or hoping for. And so I think strong character traits are something I would build in. And then the last thing I would mention is leadership skills. And when I say leadership skills, I'm not talking just about a person that wants to be a supervisor, a director, a VP. Yeah, that's part of it. But I want technical folks that are influential in their space. They're trusted and they have forward-thinking ideas. And when they speak about the subject that they're deep in, people listen. I think that's a trait, leadership skill that in the technical area is super important to have. And I would design that into my ideal professional.
Awesome. When you were talking about deep technical understanding, it kind of brought me to this thought of, back 2, 3 decades ago, were you going to be a technical professional or a business professional? And I know that you can't pick one or the other, you need both. And I think maybe it kind of falls in line with what you were talking about, which is before it was, are you a specialist or a generalist? I don't think you can be one or the other. I think you have to be both. I think you have to be a specialist with a baseline understanding of everything that influences your space. So, we're entering into a time where the standard, the status quo isn't enough, and it can't be either or, it has to be and.
Yeah, I think you're
Um,
right, because if I'm a deep technical professional, but I don't understand the business implications of what I'm asking for, I won't be trusted. I won't be influential because they're going to see me as just a person that knows how to solve this equation, but doesn't know how to make it be a real business opportunity. I think you're spot on.
yeah. I also I know this, I didn't create this, so I know this is not for me, but it's something that just helps me better understand this word, which is the idea of trust. So when we say trust, what is it? And the definition that I've heard, I really think makes a lot of sense. It's character times competence.
Hmm.
So if you don't have character but you have competence, I don't trust you. And if you do have character but no competence, then I can't trust you. So I think it's trust
That's
time competence.
that's pretty sharp. I like that. I'm going to
Yeah.
steal that without
Feel
permission,
free to
probably.
borrow it. Um, and then just in terms of technical capability and business acumen, this is one of the things that I've taught my kids because our society puts such an emphasis on academics, which it very, very important. But I think half of a ideal professional is communications ability and your
Mhm.
ability to communicate. So certainly I would add or highlight that in terms of that ideal professional, which is, yes, deep capability, ability to understand from a general standpoint everything that influences your space, but that ability to be a leader, manager, and communicate is no longer optional, I would
I
say.
agree with you, and I would roll that personally inside of leadership skills. If you're not able to communicate your idea, you won't be able to influence people to change course or to adopt a new idea.
Mhm. How do you see automation, AI, and data analytics transforming what it means to be an engineer or operator in today's world?
So I'm going to speak from the benefit of 40, almost 40 years. I'll give myself 6 months from 40 years. So,
Okay.
but getting pretty close. But automation is something that I've seen constantly change across 40 years. sometimes faster, sometimes slower. And I think it's changed what it means to be an engineer. And I know it has changed what it means to be an operator. I think that's going to continue. I think in the near term, it's even going to accelerate because it's done that before. The things that we used to be really good at or excellent at can be done by automation in these times. And I think that requires us to become good at the next thing that's coming along. And this is a silly example, Nick, but when I was a young professional, I used to design HVAC systems for aseptic, clean rooms, et cetera. And they would have pneumatic controls, meaning most people don't know what these are, but the devices were actuated by air pressure and had a lot of air pressure tubes. And I used to design that. And that's moved over to digital, and it's moving beyond digital into the next wave of things. I was decently good at pneumatic control design. Well, that's a skill that's no longer needed. It's done a different way. And so I had to learn the digital part of that and the next part of that that's coming with smart instruments or has already arrived in some cases. And
Mm.
so I think that's part of how AI, automation, et cetera, is changing what we're doing. I would also say that more than anything else, I think that engineers and operators have to be adaptable, have to be flexible. We have to have a really strong desire to learn what's next. If I'd sat back on my pneumatic controls expertise, the world would have left me behind,
Mm.
and for good reason. And so I think that no matter whether you're an engineer, operator, et cetera, you've got to be adaptable, look for what's coming, or even make the next thing that's coming. And I think that's really important in terms of automation AI. And where I work now, ISPE tries to drive that. We share knowledge and write down information in the form of guides and offer professional development. We have communities with people that are in the same field trying to share information together. So I think that's a pretty cool aspect of our industry.
Mm. I know you've led a lot of diverse teams across the world. What lessons have you learned about cultivating technical excellence and leadership in parallel?
Yeah, so I've done this a few times. I would tell you that probably the hardest assignment I had in my career, and I've had some hard assignments, so this is not like saying something flippant, was to lead a plant startup, so design, construction, startup team in China. I'm from Indiana. I grew up on a farm. I learned
Hmm.
engineering. I worked in the industry, and my company asked me to move to China, build this thing, and start it up. I was there on a team, a very diverse team. More than 25 different countries were represented in the population of that workforce. And wow, that's fascinating to see that different people from different parts of the world think differently. I would tell you that humility is an extremely important trait when you're
Mm.
interacting with other cultures.
Mm.
We, no matter where you're from in the world, sometimes assume that we know what's best because that's how we were taught. Doesn't make it true. And so if you're humble enough to ask, listen, try to seek why someone's doing something, you'll succeed much more often. And so there's a Stephen Covey principle in one of his books called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Sorry for the
Mm.
plug for him, but it's a good book that talks about seeking first to understand and then seeking to be understood.
Mm.
I think that's one of the most important things about leading a diverse team is say, so Nick, why do you think this? Or why do you do it this way? And then have you, Nick, teach me about that. And then say, okay, this is what you said. Confirm that I understood you. And then say, have you thought about this? No, here's why. Yes, here's why. I just think that's what makes diverse teams effective. And if
Mm.
you don't do it that way, you're probably going to fail.
Yeah. One thing I'll say to complement what you said is if people are going to be engaged in diverse sets of people and projects, preparation, I think, is a requirement. I think you have to understand the different uh, cultural subsets that you're going to be working with and what is there to be understood. You know, a good example is in Asia, a lot of times they'll nod yes, meaning they understand what you're saying, not that they
Yes.
agreed, right?
Right.
So that's just one of many examples.
Yeah.
Um, Understanding stereotypes. I think is another thing. Not only to make sure that you're not offending somebody inadvertently, but to understand what's the stereotype of Americans so as to be sensitive as to, we have the stereotype of being arrogant and know-it-alls.
Yeah,
So certainly making sure that if that's kind of the predisposition of people that are going to be talking to you, understand that's already what they're expecting. So try not to respond in a manner that would illuminate
cement
that
that.
that
Yeah,
disbelief,
right. Would
right?
cement that belief in place. Yes, I totally agree with you.
Yeah. And certainly, we always know what we say, but we don't always know what people hear.
Correct.
So fighting the urge to assume, especially when it comes to culturally diverse teams.
Mm, very much so.
How can organizations better balance the need for compliance and quality with fostering innovation and agility among their teams?
And I like this question too, because over the last few years, I've been thinking differently about this than I did as
Hmm.
my younger days as an engineer, where I would used to kind of in my own head at least fight against, I want to do this, but quality, quote, won't let me. I don't think that's the right way to look at things. I think that compliance and quality might seem at odds, or they might seem like they're opposed to one another, but I think in actuality, they if you have innovation, that should make quality easier. That should make compliance easier. And so, looking at that, just flip that upside down and say, I can have improved quality or compliance if I make this innovation. It just changes the way we look at things. I ran an aseptic filling operation. I had operators that this was 25 plus years ago, where they would open the aseptic zone and reach in with tweezers and do whatever operation they needed. In today's world, yeah, that probably still happens somewhere, but that operation is doomed if it's still happening. And those things are now automated. Well, that's because of innovation. And the quality is so much better than it used to be. Sterility assurance is so much stronger, and compliance is so much stronger because that kind of innovation was driven for and expected and hoped for. So I think we have to allow people to make advancements because an innovation will make things better. It might be hard in the short term, but in the long term, that's going to be so much better. And so I think we kind of actually need to demand that. That type of innovation. So we need to see it as a path to, to having improved quality or improved compliance.
Yeah. I like this next question. What role do professional organizations like ISPE play in shaping the global talent pipeline for pharma and biotech?
Yeah. So this is where probably my 40 years of experience comes into my heart. I've always considered myself to be a lifelong learner, someone that's always tried to read, study, go to another class, learn from someone else, explore something. And I think that's what ISPE is all about. So, the board of directors for ISPE, which is comprised of volunteers from across the industry, executive level people from the pharmaceutical industry, helped us early this year to write a new strategic vision. I'm gonna recite that to you, but there's a couple of words I want to highlight. So, ISPE's strategic vision is we're dedicated to enhancing the quality of human life through the power of our community of life sciences professionals by sharing knowledge and igniting innovation. So the whole idea of ISPE is really based on the idea of enhancing the quality of human life. I mean, yeah, it's nice to write a guide or produce a class or a conference that people get excited about, but that's not really the product that I'm looking for, nor is ISPE. It's really about making human life better. So ISPE has three pillars, and we've been talking about these this year, especially in Charlotte when we launched this officially. The idea of knowledge and knowledge sharing is a huge pillar in the house of ISPE, where we just share the knowledge that we have in our heads with each other. Sometimes we write it down, sometimes we speak it to each other. The idea of community, building a sense of belonging in an industry such that you've got friends everywhere, friends that help you solve problems, friends that help you deal with difficulties, and just friends that help you enjoy the work that you do. And then innovation, providing a place for people to share ideas. Idea one plus idea two equals sometimes idea three, sometimes it equals idea five. And so you add things together and you get bigger changes. And so we do that through writing guide docs and producing educational conferences, having professional development experiences, communities of practice, networking, mentoring, and on and on and on. I think that's ISPE's role in this industry. And it, for me, has been a combination of what I learned at Lilly and what I learned at CAI and the intersection of service providers and manufacturers. And I think it's a great thing.
Yeah. Well, I learned something. I didn't realize how closely aligned the FDA group was with ISPE's purpose. And for audience members that don't know this, one of the things that we discuss when we're preparing for the podcast is I say I don't want answers to the questions before the recording because it
Mhm.
can bring to light a lot of interesting things. So interestingly enough, our purpose is the FDA group is in business to enhance the quality of people's lives. And then we expand. We say whether it's our clients, employees, contractors, vendors, communities, or the patients who receive the products we touch, our purpose lies in discovering meaningful ways to apply our experience, expertise, and passion for quality in everything we do. So very interesting that we
Yeah,
have a
very
very,
similar.
very, very similar.
And Nick, those are noble ideas, right? Those are things that you can get excited about, and your team can, and your customers can. And the same with ISPE. It's not mundane, and it's not just made up. It's real. That's really what we're about.
Yeah. Well, and I actually can provide a story to at least validate my side because I can't validate your side, but I would agree that I'm sure they're very genuine. So the way that we identified this is we implemented EOS, which is the entrepreneurial operating system, and one of the things when you decide to implement is you hire an implementer and they have to go through and identify what are your core values, your vision, purpose, mission. And the question I received is, Nick, do you get a case of the Mondays? And I said, no, actually, I don't. And he said, why? And it was because I knew I was, enhancing, the quality of people's lives. So to your point, it really is not cliche. It's very meaningful.
I think I remember reading that part, or at least part of that story in the book that you referred me to that you produced. So I did complete that book a couple months ago. And I think I remember that statement being made in there. So if
Yep.
I remember correctly,
Yep. Yeah,
I think
you're
it's
probably,
correct. You're right.
yeah. Are today's academic and training programs aligned with what the industry truly needs, or do we need a new model for preparing future pharma professionals?
Um, yes, we do. I would say that all of our training programs, our academic programs, are rooted in the past. This is natural. This is what happens when we teach students, learners, what has been learned by other people. That's the nature of education. We're teaching somebody what somebody else already learned. And so it's always going to be rooted in the past because of that.
Hmm.
That's not bad. That's required because to learn or do new things, you probably have to understand. You do have to understand the foundation of what got us to where we are. I think on the job training in the workforce, and I don't want that to sound mundane, like the simple stuff of the procedure of work, but the idea of exploring things in an actual workforce where business matters and numbers matter. I think that's where the edge, I call the edge of learning, can occur. So as you're exploring a way to make a process more efficient, a chemical process in a manufacturing plant, you're out there on the cutting edge of what if we tweak this, what if we tweak that, and you're not doing that wildly without validation, but in pilot plants and such, you can do that. I think that's where people need to learn the most, and we need to have learning environments for that inside of our business in life sciences. I would say this though, Nick, that the way we learn things is changing. If you think about the way you and I learned in university or even early in our career, it's different than the way people learn today. This is a silly example, but think about Netflix and the way that you used to order a disc, come to your house, watch that movie, send that disc back. And then that evolved into streaming. And I, at the time, thought, well, this is just an idea. It'll always be discs, but it wasn't.
Mm.
Now it's all streaming. And that's the whole system now. And so now even those are delivering not just a movie, but a series of shows that are broken up into pieces, like
Mhm.
not a 3-hour movie, but 3 1-hour shows.
Mm.
And that's the way learning is being adapted or adopted more recently by
Mm,
folks, even mostly the younger people. I think they're seeing things broken into even smaller components,
mm,
bit by bit. You might call it micro learning.
mm.
And sometimes it can be as short as 5 minutes on this or 3 minutes on that. And I think that's the way consumption is steering. And so if I sit back and say, well, it'll never be that way, then I'm thinking Netflix will always have discs and not streaming. I think learning is going to turn into a bunch of bite-sized pieces
Yeah.
that people can weave into uh, their lives where it fits, rather than having to sit down and consume something that takes 3 hours.
Yeah. I love it. I'm gonna make a confession and then I'm gonna comment on the learning. I find it difficult to watch movies now, and it's not something I'm proud of. I've just I have fallen into the the that place where this constant um, availability of small portions
Yeah,
of content. It's hard now so we at the FDA group, we actually have a movie club. Once a month we watch a movie, and we're supposed to be
yeah.
watching oh God, the one with uh Richard Gere. Um
Well, there's lots by him, so I'm not sure
yeah,
which one that
it
is.
was where he's the lawyer. Um
Okay.
Primal Fear. Primal
Okay.
Fear.
All right.
And I know I need to watch it, and it's due Friday, and I haven't watched it yet. And it's because I'm afraid of having to sit down and watch a three
A
hour
chunk of
movie.
time, right?
Yeah.
And Nick, this younger folks, you're not old, but younger folks, they've grown up with this
Mm,
5 minutes of this, 10 minutes of that, 15 minutes here, 2 minutes.
mm,
And that's the way they expect the world to be delivered to them.
yeah.
And so if we don't change the way learning is delivered, I think we're going to miss that whole audience.
Yeah. Now, my compliment to that comment is A, when you're training a new hire, definitely shorten the amount of areas, the duration, and spread them out with breaks in between. And then, in order to enhance continuous learning, big training sessions are going to be more of a challenge. There's got to be 5 minute videos
Yep,
and systematize it so you don't say, hey, weren't we supposed to be doing this, that, and the other thing? Systematize it, try to create small portions. If there's a way to measure understanding, then certainly do that.
sure.
Let's go back to the cultural thing that we were talking about earlier. So, in terms of your experience with what we were talking about in terms of multiple cultures and markets, what can we learn from how other regions are developing their pharmaceutical workforces?
And so this is something I've explored as I traveled the world at Lilly and did my work, or at CAI, and especially now at ISPE, which is a learning organization, a knowledge sharing organization. We have 25,000 members around the world from over 120 different countries. And so there's a lot of diversity in the way of thinking, the way of living, the way of working. And so that's fascinating to me. And personally, I've lived and worked in lots of different parts of the world, certainly in the Americas because I was born here, but I've also lived and worked in Europe, and I've lived and worked in Asia, not just there on a business trip, but there for
Work.
a year to 3 years, depending on where I was assigned. And I kind of learned there isn't one right answer,
Mm,
um, unless maybe it's this idea. The right answer is to allow variety in ideas, to allow variety in learning styles, to allow variety in viewpoints. If we try to fit things into it must fit in this whole,
mm,
then we're not going to learn from the other culture. Um, it's not to say that there's not something that's universal. There are principles that are universal. There are mathematic principles that it doesn't matter which culture we're in, they are principles and they don't change. Physics, the same way. And you can name any of the first principles concepts that it's just true. It doesn't matter whether you're Chinese, Indian, or United States American. And so those things are always true. But there are some parts of science that evolve and change because not because the science is new or different, but because we learned more about the details of it. And so those things change across time. For example, what we know about microbiology today isn't the same as what we knew about microbiology 30 years ago.
Mm,
We've learned a lot more. We can see, more minute detail. We can study how things work, and those things have evolved across that. Those bits of knowledge have evolved across the decades.
mm,
I think some parts of the world have learned faster than other parts of the world. I think that's going to be normal in any culture. That's probably even true across the United States. There are parts of
mm,
the states that have learned slower and parts of the states that have learned faster. But I don't think we should ever assume that we, you or I, know best just because of our background or just because of our experience or just because of the place that we've lived our lives. I
mhm.
think we have to let people express viewpoints because that's how you learn.
Yeah. One thing I'll add too is America is diverse and somewhat multicultural, but more diverse than multicultural. And the reason I'm pointing that out is I don't want people to confuse the fact that they worked with an American of Indian heritage or an American of Chinese heritage or whatever and say, you check that box. You didn't. So do not underestimate the significance from learning and actually working in with another country, because your ability to be lead and manage and do business in other regions will become a lot easier for you as a professional if you have that experience. And again, don't confuse that with working with somebody of an ethnic background in America. It's not the same thing. Yeah.
Excellent point.
Yeah. You've emphasized inspiring teams even in difficult circumstances. How can leaders in pharma motivate a new generation that values purpose, technology, and speed differently than prior generations?
Yeah, so I talk about this. If you read my bio on LinkedIn, you'll see words like you've just spoken here. I
Hmm.
would say it's important to inspire or engage your team, even if the circumstances are mundane. It's maybe even more important to do it when it's difficult because people tend to give up or throw up their hands in despair when things are really hard. But if they're mundane and boring, they also need to be inspired to produce their best work, I think people want to enjoy what they do. I found that to be true. It's true for me. You and I, all of us, we spend so much of our lives doing our work. We should want to enjoy that. That should be part of the human story. I'll try to be quick with this story, but when I entered Lilly almost 40 years ago, there were a lot of gray haired engineers. These guys that had grown up at Lilly and they were 50 to 60 years old. So they're towards the end of their careers. And they were telling me, well, things aren't the way they used to be. This place isn't like it used to be. And I just entered and I was thinking, this place is great. Right.
Right.
And so 32 years later, when I was retiring, I remember telling somebody, this place isn't like it used to be. And all of a sudden,
You
my
saw it.
memory kicked in. I remember what those guys said. And I thought, that's just happened for me. And
Mm,
so, what I would say is the workforce always evolves. Sometimes it moves past us, and sometimes we keep pace with that. And I think the learning for me in that, even after 32 years, was don't disregard the youth and inexperience of this upcoming generation. Let them use their energy. That's something they have as a resource that's far greater than what I have because I've used so much energy to get to this point. I have a lot left, but not like the exuberance of the young people that I meet. Remember that used to be me.
mm,
I used to be that person. This place is great, right? Let them use that. I think they're going to change the world. They're going to create the future, which is what you and I did as we've advanced through this industry. We took it from the shoulders of the last people, and now we're about to place it on the shoulders of others. And so I think as we do that, as we teach others, demonstrating a strong character for ourselves, including other people in the work that we do, and then winning together are the
mm.
things that I would encourage people to do with the next generation of workers.
Yeah, excellent. I will just highlight for everyone, we're past the millennials. We're now in Gen Z. And I have listened to speakers. Gen Z is not the same as millennials. They are different. In my polite opinion, Gen Z is better is not the right word. But there are some positive attributes of Gen Z that kind of outshine the millennial generation. And so, as much as we say, oh, the next generation's worse, 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 I think there were a lot of challenges that we experienced with the millennials that we aren't going to experience with Gen Z. Some of it we will, some of it we won't. So, for anybody that's interested, definitely do a Google search or go into ChatGPT, your favorite GPT, and find out what the differences are between the millennials and Gen Z. I think you might be surprised to see the answer. So, Mike, this has been fantastic. Really appreciate your insight. Before we close, what would you like to leave the audience with?
So I also, Nick, appreciate getting to talk to you. We did this a few years ago in a different setting, and I really enjoyed it then. I've enjoyed it just as much now, so happy to contribute to this. This is what I would offer to people. I think the titles that we put on generations are just titles. Whether it's I'm a boomer, I'm at the very end of the boomers. You can name all of our generations. We're all made of people, and each of those generations with titles has a spectrum of different types of personalities. And I think no matter which age group you're in or what title might be tagged to you, look at the others, look for the positives. What can you learn from each of those groups? And then try to inspire each of them or be inspired by them. I think we're all in this fight together. This fight is making the world a better place, improving the quality of human life. We're all in that fight together. And so let's win that together. Let's work together on that, no matter where we are across the spectrum of time.
Yep. The paradox is the less you focus on your own happiness and the more you focus on other people's happiness, the more happier you become. So, yes. Really, really great way to end the podcast, Mike. So thank you so much for everyone listening. As always, if you find conversations like this valuable, please share it with a colleague or your professional network. Subscribe to get updates of new episodes at thefdagroup.com/podcast and follow the FDA Group on LinkedIn for industry updates and cutting edge insights. If you'd like to talk about project or resource needs, just head over to thefdagroup.com to get in touch, or feel free to connect with me personally on LinkedIn. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we will see you all in the next rundown.